a management consultant currently working in London. Aditya is a keynote speaker and consultant in the area of strategy, transformation, and leadership development. He has addressed audience over 25 countries. He is the first Indian representing India to be a finalist in World Championship of Public Speaking in 2015, Las Vegas, and had a podium finish. He was also a finalist in 2017 and a semi-finalist in 2014. If you heard his World Championship speech, when he tells the word scratch, each one of us listening can actually feel the scratch. And that is something what communication is all about. Converting words into feelings which hit our physical body. Without any further ado, let me take this opportunity to welcome the star of the evening, our dearest keynote speaker, DTM Aditya Maheshwaran. DTM Aditya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amal, for that lovely introduction. You're newly married, so I hope you don't get scratched anytime soon in the relationship. Wishing you a happy married life. Manzoor said it so well. It's really homecoming for me in Qatar. It's one of the places I enjoy most in any kind of speaking tours that I've been in. And as Manzoor, you said it so right. So many friends, so many well-wishers, and so many people who just open their arms and embrace a person. Is very hospitable. So thank you for inviting me again. When Anita spoke to me, Anita said, Aditya, I want the session to be inspiring. I want it to be educative. I wanted to ensure that after listening to the session, everybody commits to Toastmasters. It's like, well, sure, Anita, I'll try. So that's why we've named the session Commit to Conquer. In the spirit of the session of commitment, and for you to be committed through the length of the session, I will ensure that my monologue is short, and we'll open it up for some interaction and fun as soon as possible, hopefully in 20-25 minutes for the rest of the session that I have. And feel free to ask questions around the topic, but also outside the topic. The questions, the answers to which may help you in your growth as a leader, as a speaker, as a Toastmaster, as a person, etc., etc. I don't promise to have all the answers, but I'll do my best to share my perspectives. Now, why did we call this Commit to Conquer? There's a very interesting paradox at Toastmasters. On one hand, we hear all motivational speakers, self-help books, people we admire tell us that the shortest route to success is hard work and commitment, right? People like Malcolm Gladwell have said famously in their book saying, if you put 10,000 hours of commitment in anything you do, success is assured for you. And he proves that through empirical examples like Roger Federer or Michael Schumacher or Sachin Tendulkar or A.R. Rahman. So these are people who've put 10,000 hours of practice and they become masters of their art. So there seems to be some correlation between commitment, hard work, sincerity, doing the tough yards, as they say, the tough hours, 10,000 hours to become a master at your craft. It's true with the public speaking, it's true with leadership, etc. So that's one side of the paradox, where there is a direct connection between commitment and success, and which we see all around us. But at the other side, you find commitment is the toughest thing to do. Like take Toastmasters. Any guesses in terms of what's the attrition rate at Toastmasters globally? It's close to 50%, which means in this call, there are 42 of you. Suppose we hypothesize that this represents a global Toastmaster audience. 1 in every 2 people in this call may not be a Toastmaster next year. That's what 50% attrition means. Well, we may get another 40 new members, but half the people in this call may not even be Toastmasters next year. That's a pretty large lacuna of commitment, isn't it? And then there are 10 of you, the senior members, who would be Toastmasters even after 30 years. I know that. But there is a larger population in Toastmasters who lead to a 50% attrition. Now, if it's so easy to have an empirical correlation by saying, just keep your mind, the monkey mind, the wonky mind aside, and just commit to Toastmasters, put in your hours, you can become a master of your skill. If it's so empirically true, why is it so difficult to commit to whatever we do? Not just Toastmasters, it could be morning exercise, it could be anything that you struggle to do. So today I'm going to start by saying 3 things that I've learned in my journey as a Toastmaster, but also in my journey as a leader and a professional speaker, as a consultant, that have helped me pivot strategically when I felt myself lacking in commitment. And I want to share those 3 litmus tests or acid tests that you can use when you feel a drop in commitment, and that may help you along the way. And after that, we will pause and open for questions and interact. Right? Is that fine with you as an agenda? Do you have a choice? You do have a choice to log off, so please don't do that. We will hopefully make it useful for you. The first reason why people often don't commit is that a forum like Toastmasters, after a point, has less to offer you, isn't it? There is a point at which you leverage everything you can out of Toastmasters. You find yourself reach a plateau, or you become the best speaker of your club. And after a point, it doesn't really give you as much as it did when you joined Toastmasters. That's a very genuine reason to stop your commitment to attending a meeting or to giving into Toastmasters. Now, I was in one such position way back in 2011. I had been in Toastmasters at that time already for 6 years or 7 years. I had finished my DTM in 2010. I had become a district officer in 2009. And by 2011, I wanted to do other things in life. I thought I'd reached the summit of Toastmasters. And it was true that I wasn't gaining anything incrementally attending a meeting. I was being an evaluator every single time. And that wasn't giving much to me in return. Some of you might have heard this story, but I was sitting in the Marina Beach in Chennai with my mentor. I'm going to mute one of you who's, yeah. I was sitting in Marina Beach with a mentor of mine, and I was telling her, listen, I want to quit Toastmasters. It's not giving me much in return. And she looked at me as if she knew the answer. And the mentors, if you've had mentors, you would know mentors have this weird pattern of, if you ask them a question, they'll ask you a completely different question, which has got nothing to do with your question. And then they'll try to connect the dots. So I asked my mentor, I think I'm going to not renew at Toastmasters. She said, Aditya, look at the Bay of Bengal in front of us. If I ask you to go to the sea and bring back as much water as you can, how much water do you think you can bring? And I said, I probably can bring 20 liters of water, but what's that got to do with what I asked you? She said, is that all? I said, probably 30 liters of water. I was more muscular then, 30, 40 liters of water. Then she asked me a question. Is the water you can bring back from the Bay of Bengal, does it depend on how much water there is in the sea? I said, no, because for this question, purpose of this question, water in the sea is infinite, right? How much water I can bring back only depends on the vessel that I carry to the sea. She said, exactly. If you take a teaspoon, you may have the Bay of Bengal as supply, but you will only come back with a teaspoonful of water because that's all your vessel can hold. If you go with a tanker lorry, you will come back with a tanker lorry full of water. So the amount of water the Bay of Bengal can give you has got less to do with Bay of Bengal and more to do with the vessel that you choose to carry as you enter that arena of supply. And she said, Aditya, do you sense where I'm getting to? I said, you're a good mentor. I know where you're going now. The amount of learnings a forum like Toastmasters can offer me has got less with the question that we foolishly ask, that has Toastmasters has anything more to offer me? It depends more on the vessel that I carry into Toastmasters every single time. And then she asked me the question, what kind of vessel did you carry when you joined Toastmasters? And I realized that in the first couple of years in Toastmasters, my learning was accelerated. I learned through every opportunity. I used to go to demo meetings. I used to go 2-3 meetings a week. I used to try different type of evaluations. I used to do poetry evaluation. Then I used to do some acronym-based evaluation. I used to evaluate using some zeitgeist in the room. I used to take characters from the speaker and give it back as if so much of innovation. And so there was a large vessel. I used to ensure that I use my mentor before every speech. But 5 years down the line, I didn't need a mentor. I'm the mentor of mentors. I don't really need a mentor anymore. Then she asked me, so what's the vessel that you carry? I realized the vessel that I carried into Toastmaster meetings had slowly become a teaspoon. I was living in the glorious past that I had as a DTM, as a district director, district officer, etc., etc. But that's true with most of us, isn't it? In any field that we embark upon, the first few years, there is so much more that we learn. And over time, there's a diminishing margin of returns. As a consultant, I was working with a CFO in a company here in London. And he said something very interesting. He felt stagnated in his career. He was a fast tracker. Within 5 to 10 years in his career, he jumped 4 designations. He got promoted 4 times and became a senior employee within the finance department, 1 level below the CFO. And the reason he had been promoted so fast is because he had put in so much he had learned quickly on the job. He was dynamic. He had created a network for himself. And then finally, in the last 5 years, he realized he had been relying on the reputation that he had created initially and not really accumulating any additional learning in the role. So he felt stagnated now. And that's very true in Toastmasters. You'll reach a point where the vessel that you carry becomes very small, and therefore your learning is truncated and stagnated, and that's where your commitment drops. So what's the answer to that? Try to always come with a learner's mindset instead of trying to come with a senior mindset. What's a senior's mindset? A senior's mindset is to say that I'm only a giver. It seems very unselfish at the outset. It seems very altruistic when you hear, oh, I'm here to give back to young Toastmasters. I'm here just to serve. I'm here just to lead. No, you can give back only if you stay relevant. You can give back only if you are improving as a speaker and leader. We saw that in the wave when the pathways came in. A lot of very senior members felt slightly irrelevant because what made them good mentors were the fact of their seniority, not fact of competence. So when pathways came in, it took away seniority. It leveled everybody because there was no additional knowledge that just tenure in Toastmasters could give. So people were gravitating to people who had competence, not just years at Toastmasters. So sometimes you have to, before we say, I'm here just to give, the question is, am I learning in the process as well? What do I want to take out of Toastmasters for myself so that I can give more and give better? So the first point really is retain that learner's mindset, the mindset you walked into your first Toastmaster meeting with. And that defines, in neuroscience language, if some of you are interested in neuroscience, you would realize these 2 words. There are 2 kinds of mindsets in which we can do any job, proving or improving, right? And if you are able to be slightly vulnerable for a few seconds and ask yourself, what does your quick self-preservation make you, proving or improving? Some people, their first instinct is to prove themselves in whatever they do. Okay, I've become an area director, so I have to prove myself now. I've become a senior manager now. I have to show, I have to prove, I have to secure that, I have to occupy that space now. But real people who really become successful focus on improving as a mindset, right? Now that I've become the area director, how do I improve myself further to achieve greater things? So neuroscience says people who focus on proving all the time to their own heads, it's not just to other people. In their own mind, they're validating, do I belong? Do I belong? People who are focused on proving have something called the fixed mindset. You must have heard of this term called fixed mindset. Fixed mindset. And people whose mindset is that of improving have what we call the growth mindset. Again, you might have heard of the term growth mindset. So if your focus is on proving, you have a fixed mindset. If your focus is on improving, you have a growth mindset. What is the meaning of growth mindset? Growth mindset means my capacity is not static. If I work towards it, I can enhance capacity. There is no yes and no, I can or I cannot. That's the proving mindset, or that's the fixed mindset. I'm either good at it or bad at it. A growth mindset person says, with the right effort, I can become better at this. There is no end to learning. So we all say the right words, nobody would deny it. But in our own heads, we often go into that self-preservation mode of proving and not improving. So the first way to commit yourself with energy and effort is to ask yourself, am I retaining that learner's mindset by wanting to improve, not just prove to others? The second part, and I'm going to say 3 and then shut up. The second bit, it gets even more interesting here. The second part is we often find that commitment places constraints on what else you can do in that time, right? If you have to be committed to Toastmasters, there's a sacrifice elsewhere. If you have to be committed to playing a sport, there's a sacrifice elsewhere. So Jordan Peterson, you might have listened to Jordan Peterson. He's a professor of psychology and a very famous and controversial speaker. He has a very nice line where he says, most responsible people are accountable to their current self. It's very few intelligent people hold themselves accountable to their current and future self. I'll tell you what that means. That's a very powerful statement that he makes. When you're accountable to your current happiness, you're doing everything in your power to elevate your level of experience of life today, right? But Jordan Peterson says, you are living many lives at the same time. It's just separated by time. You're living many versions of yourself at the same time. Just that you live one at a time. It's separated by time. Before you know, you're going to be 10 years older. Before you know, you're going to be 20 years older. You're not 20 years older now, but in a way, you are all of these versions of you, only separated by time, isn't it? You can't escape it. You'll get there. So wherever you are now, hold yourself accountable and responsible to the future versions of yourself as well. So that what you do now is not just helping you today, but setting up all future versions of yourself to success as well. If you're holding yourself accountable only for today, you are most likely going to fall in the traps of temptations of what tickles your vanity today. And most often that may be detrimental. It may be useful for your current version. It may be detrimental to the future versions of yourself when you get there, right? A simple example is if you get into the habit of chain smoking, it is beneficial for your current self, meaning it gives you that pleasure, the nicotine high. But it's probably detrimental to another version of yourself, which you will become, which is only separated by time. You will get there sometime. And when you get there, you've realized you did not set yourself up for success when you would get there. And so you're not holding yourself accountable today for your future versions. You're only holding yourself accountable for today, which is which is pretty mind-opening when you think about it. Let me give you an example. As you know, I live in London. I used to live in a place called Harrow. Now I live in Canary Wharf. In Harrow, there's this famous school called Harrow School. What a creative name, right? Harrow School. But that's a very famous boarding school. That's where Winston Churchill studied. That's where Jawaharlal Nehru studied for a few years. So it's a pretty famous boarding school. It's very expensive. So nobody can even dream of putting their kids there. But they do allow weekend tours of the school. So I wanted to tour the school when I moved into London, because it's supposed to have some beautiful landscapes, horse riding and all of that. So I went on a tour to the school, and I was going through their sports arena, sports complex. And I went to this indoor sports section where I saw this little guy around 10 years old practicing gymnastics, doing all kind of gymnastics, headstand, flips and rotations and all of that. He was just 10 years old. It was a Sunday morning. All right, I said, good for him. He's a very committed person. Then I went around the other parts of the school and came back here. He was still practicing 3 hours later. I couldn't hold myself back. A poor guy of 10, Sunday morning. So I went up to him and said, hey, I've observed you practicing for the last 4 hours on a Sunday morning. Don't you want to have fun like the other kids on a Sunday morning? Why are you killing yourself? He looked at me calmly. Imagine a boy of 10 years old. He looked at me calmly and said, sir, very polite English manners, I guess. He said, sir, the other kids won't represent Britain in the 2028 Olympics. I may. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, sir, we either have freedom. Sorry, he said in his own kid's way, he said, I either have freedom to choose what I want to do now or what I want to be then. Freedom lies only on one side though. If I want to do what I want to do now, I can't be who I want to be then. If I want to be who I want to be then, I can't do whatever I want to do now, sir. I have a choice. Freedom lies on one side. For me, it was like hearing the entire theory of karma from this 10-year-old English boy in one word. What he meant was, our causes and consequences are like a stick. The moment you move one end of the stick, the other end of the stick loses its freedom to be where it is. It moves along, right? So his freedom of, I will do what I want to do. I want to have ice creams now. I want to play video games on Sunday morning. I just want to be like any other kid. He does have the choice now. But in exercising choice today, he has restricted his choice for tomorrow. He can't then also say, I want to be 2028 Olympics gymnast. But by exercising choice, by holding yourself accountable to a future self, as Jordan Peterson says, that I want to exercise a choice of wanting to be an Olympic medalist in 2028, severely constrains his choice today. He can't do 100 things. He has to do 100 things. He has to sleep for 12 hours. He has to work out for 4 hours, whatever it is. But it is that choice consequence paradox that successful people are able to game with. Meaning, how can I be accountable as much to the temptations of my current self, as well as invest in the other versions of myself, which I don't experience now, but I will eventually experience. And by the time I get there, I'm happy that I've set myself up for success, right? So we have a choice. So freedom today, constraint tomorrow, constraint today, freedom tomorrow, right? So that's literally how any kind of cause and effect works. So that's the second bit, to commit yourself. It's very motivating if you think of the various versions of yourself you're accountable to apart from just today. And then you would start. It's just like what we do with money, isn't it? The reason you invest money today is because you know you're not just accountable for yourself today, you're accountable to yourself when you retire. You're accountable to yourself when you pass away, to your family. So what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for success for different versions of yourself today. Otherwise, you should ideally be spending everything you have now to enjoy life now. But you don't, because we are being taught as structure to be accountable for different versions of self. But we often don't do that for other spheres of life. So that's a very interesting litmus test and a way to consider how we invest our time and effort now. The last point I wanted to say, and before I conclude, is it's again a pretty interesting point that I've learned in my life, is we derive the optimal best from any experience when we are engaged in that experience. But very few of us have the ability to stay engaged without getting entangled in that experience. Let me explain. How many times you've heard Toastmasters complain about politics in the club or area or whatever it is? How many Toastmasters complain about, oh, there are cliques, circles, etc., etc.? Or how many Toastmasters, I'm not saying in Qatar, in the world over, world over. Oh boy, here as well in the UK, I want to leave Toastmasters because they should have made me the area director, but they've not made me the area director. Where I'm coming to is, I had a Toastmaster friend call me and say that she's going to quit Toastmasters because she wasn't made the area director. And there's a lady from India. Obviously, I won't take names. And I asked her, you're a really talented speaker. You have a bright future at Toastmasters. Who knows, probably even the championships. Why would you want to quit? Because there's so much of politics, blah, blah, blah. Now, the interesting thing is this. 1.5 years before that day, she didn't even know something like Toastmasters existed. She joined after that. Let alone know something like area director exists. 1.5 years before that day, if I'd asked her, do you want to be area director? She'd be like, what does that even mean? I already have 4 commitments in life. What the hell is area director? But now 1.5 years later, her biggest source of suffering in her life is the fact that she wasn't made area director. You see, where we need to stay engaged, we get entangled and often lose commitment because of that web that we get into and get caught in and place some desires on that neither contributes to our learning, but it contributes to our ego, and get entangled in that process. It's like my friend who studied in Harvard University. After finishing Harvard, he worked in Wall Street for literally 10 years. And he had this slight guilt that he had made a lot of money in Wall Street, but he hadn't done much for India. He's from India originally. So he quit his job in Harvard and went to Hyderabad to join an NGO. And this NGO was doing quite a lot of good work in Andhra Pradesh. Now, 3 months after that, we were talking and he said, I've quit this NGO. I'm going back to the US. I said, what happened? This was your passion. You had done so much of due diligence before taking this important step in your life. You want to go back? Why? He said, when I joined this NGO, they promised to make me a green tier volunteer. But when I joined, they made me a blue tier volunteer. I said, I don't understand any of this. What does that mean? He said, all volunteers in that NGO were assigned tiers, green, blue, red, depending on seniority. Now, they had assigned him a blue tier when he should have been a green tier because he's from Harvard and he has so much experience. And that was such a, since they did blue tier, to hell with them. I'm going back. They don't deserve my help. It's like, but do you even know what blue and green tier was like 6 months ago? No. But how can they do that? But wasn't your larger goal that of service and giving back? The point again here is, where all great passions were not kept in check at the level of engagement, takes us to a level of entanglement. And because of things that are actually not that important, we lose commitment in things that, and just reflect on everything in life, isn't it? At the age of 22, when you're starting your career, it is such a beautiful thing to work. But then beyond staying engaged, we get entangled and we get into politics, bad boss, this, relationships, Toastmasters. So how does one stay engaged in any field without getting entangled in that samsara or in that web of life is a very important skill that we need to cultivate to have a prolonged marathon in Toastmasters. Because remember, it's Toastmasters that makes a Deepak Menon or Balraj Arunachal. It's Toastmasters that makes a Dhananjay Hetirachi, that makes some of wonderful speakers. There is also Toastmasters that makes 50% attrition every year. So people are able to stay engaged without getting entangled into the web of that particular activity are people who have the duration ability, people who run the marathon. Anybody can run a sprint, but it requires engagement without entanglement to run that marathon. How can you give to Toastmasters as if that means the entire life to you? At the same time, be detached from Toastmasters in a way that you don't get entangled in things that don't really matter to you. So that's the combination that successful people have. How can you work in your job in a way that your entire life depends on it, but at the same time stay detached in a way you don't get into entanglement into that promotion thing, which kind of becomes your biggest source of worry in the next 2 years, and you lose every joy that the job otherwise would have given you, right? So that's the balance between engagement and entanglement. So let's pause now. As usual, I've exceeded the time I thought I would speak for. But to summarize, we talked about the fact that we all know that commitment is important for success. But beyond the typical self-help kind of motivational dialogues, what really holds us back from committing to something? Number one is we lose the learner's mindset very quickly. And we, through some altruistic self-justification, we put on other hats that don't work in the long term. Because unless we continue to learn, we will lose interest at some point in time, or we will become irrelevant. So how do you continue to wear that learner's hat and become better every time? And remember the vessel that you carry, not the ocean. The second point was, how can I hold myself accountable to future versions of myself? And what does that mean in terms of what I choose to do and not to do today? Freedom there means constraint today. Freedom today means very restricted possibility of who I can be in the future, right? It's very obvious. If I want to be fit at 50, I need to ask what that would require me to do now and what that would require me not to do now. So my choices today are constrained to that consequence I want. But if I want freedom today, I can't also choose consequence in the future. It's a very rough way of putting it, but that's how do I be accountable to different versions of myself? And finally, how do I stay engaged without slipping into entanglement, which makes everything which is a source of joy into suffering. We unnecessarily infuse into it. So these are constant reinforcements rather than techniques or tools that is useful for reflection. Let's pause now, and I'm going to open the floor up for questions, thoughts, comments. And remember, as I said, it need not just be on what I spoke about now. It could be on anything that's useful for you, including public speaking or any of your questions. So I hand it back over to Amal to lead it.
Thank you, DTM Aditya, for the wonderful enlightening speech. And we have our first question from our dearest DTM Sundaresan Rajesh, sure. Engaged and entanglement was well said. And there is a saying that rough sea makes the good mariner. Entanglement may be a part of learning. This is a question from entanglement. As you mentioned about engagement and entanglement. So he's asking, even entanglement, is it a part of learning, right?
It's a great question. And of course it is. It's very difficult to be Buddhas right when we embark on an activity. The idea is not to be perfect. The idea is to be able to call the bluff of your mind through good feedback, through good mentors, through your own self-awareness, that you find that people who draw most out of an experience are people, or rather I'll put it another way. As I said again, the person who's drawn most out of Toastmasters is in the same club as the person who feels that I'm going to quit. So it's not the experience that is different for both of them. It's the attitude they bring to it, right? But at the same time, when you begin, you're bound to get into 500 different things and probably get into mess in whatever you do. But the idea is to ask myself, am I adding value to myself? Am I adding value to others? Is it helping me in the original vision that I had for myself when I joined Toastmasters? As long as that is getting satisfied, you quickly take yourself from that entanglement and move forward here and there. But absolutely, you cannot be perfect right at the beginning.
Well said, Aditya. Even I feel that there is actually very thin line between this engagement and entanglement that we hardly notice. We think it's our passion and we are getting engaged with this, but we don't notice that we are getting entangled. Like on a later stage, only we realized that there is actually a difference between getting engaged and entangled. Maybe we need a different perspective to identify that. Somebody else should point out that.
Okay. Because it tickles your vanity in the beginning, right? Yeah. So I agree with you. I can give you an example of I keep talking about Sebastian to many people. I mean, because this point around engagement and entanglement gets me into trouble sometimes, because ideally it requires it's a deeper discussion, and I often tie it up with philosophy and other things during my Sunday philosophy classes. But I mean, from a Toastmaster point of view, Sebastian was this very nice, very energetic member who joined Chennai Toastmasters in 2006 or 7 when I was the president. And he was a businessman. And, at that time in India in Toastmasters, we were really bad at getting sponsors, etc. So when Sebastian suddenly got up in the club and said, I'm ready to give 50,000 rupees for the division conference, we were like, wow, this is the man we need. so we immediately latched onto I mean the community there, latched onto Sebastian, suddenly made him the PR head of the division, etc., etc. And he suddenly found that newfound spotlight on him. He enjoyed it. And in 1 year, he stopped renewing at Toastmasters. Then I asked Sebastian, what happened? And Sebastian said, listen, Aditya, nobody asked me why I joined Toastmasters. All I wanted to do was I'm a businessman who is in real estate. I wanted to speak more confidently to my customers. I just felt like I got entangled into too many things. Started with that altruistic motive of giving, but then just got sucked into all these pressure of now I can't disappoint others. I've already set a benchmark high. How can I say no now? I gave 50,000, so then somebody else is now asking for another 50,000. What do I do? So what can be a source of joy? Toastmasters became a source of headache for him, to a point where we had really pushed him out of Toastmasters of no fault of his. Now, it's not our fault. It's not his fault. The fault is we have to be very clear in our own minds what we want out of an experience, right? When there is no clarity, it's difficult to say no. When you can't say no, you're going to be sucked into 100 different things. So that's how do I stay engaged without getting too entangled in the process? But it's the philosophy of this that matters. The specificities, when I say through examples, may get lost because each of our context is very different.
No, I personally believe it's a perfect example. Like we need to have a different level of self-awareness to make sure what we do and stay in the same way, so that the peer pressure doesn't put much on us. We have another question from our dear Toastmaster Anjali Pimple. She has mentioned indeed an enlightening session. Could you please explain how one can make poetic evaluation? Please throw some light on it.
I shouldn't have said that, I guess. Well, not bad, Anjali. You did listen to every line of the speech then, because I just slipped that in. Well, that was the time in my Toastmaster journey when I'd done a lot of evaluations. I was getting a little bored of evaluating. So I thought, let me try to rekindle my love for evaluations. So I said, how do I do it differently? So I said, each week, each Sunday when I go to my Toastmaster meeting, I'm going to try a new format or structure to evaluation. So poetry evaluation means, it again depends on your strength. You don't need to do it. But I, from a younger age, found it very fascinating to write rhymes or sentences that ended with rhymes. So poetry, like a typical 1-2-1-2 rhythm, or a 1-1-2-2 rhythm, or a 1-2-1-2-4-4 kind of a rhythm. So when I heard a speaker, I would try to take notes, and in that time I have after the speaker and before I go on stage, I'll try to write my entire evaluation as a series of 16 sentences or 20 sentences that rhyme, that follow a note or a rhythm. Imagine the challenge that I had in 20 minutes to compose that. So that would really keep me active, keep my brain cells active, and obviously create this wow factor on stage, because nobody would expect someone to come say like this poetry for an evaluation. After that, I would do something like an acronym. So if I'm evaluating AMAL, for example, I would use AMAL as areas of strength and areas of development. So Amal will remember AMAL as the acronym for his feedback, right? Then I would do something like I said, zeitgeist, which is what's the sense of the current? If the speaker spoke about, say, her journey in an airplane, say just an example, her journey in an airplane, the first flight experience she had, then I would try to use the metaphor in that speech in my evaluation. For example, let me tell you how your speech took off. Then how was the body of the speech? Just like a body of the airplane, which requires a structure, a solid steel structure around it, your structure was like this. Just like the content within the airplane have different people with different personalities, your content had different. So you just take the sense of the current of the speech and do it. Or sometimes you may want to do something that is even more crazy. I can give you 5-10 more examples. But the idea is each time you push yourself to be creative, you're exploring a different facet in you. You're developing a skill beyond just evaluation, which you probably have got bored to do. And you're also making it interesting for your audience. And more importantly, you're giving a very unique kind of takeaway for the speaker. So that's the different types of evaluation that I explored.
Thank you, Aditya. I think you, and I believe you ended Toastmaster at a very young age when your learning skills and creativity was very live. How old were you when you were?
How old do you think I am now, Amal?
Tough question, because when I saw the World Championship, you were having a lot of hair, so I think you are pretty old now.
Correct. Then Mansoor said Taj Mahal kind of shine marble, so I shaved it off. No, I was just joking. I joined Toastmasters when I was 19.
Pretty young age.
Yeah, pretty young age. So I was fortunate to have that happen. In fact, my father was one fine morning reading the newspaper, and he saw at the bottom right saying, Chennai Toastmasters meets on Sunday mornings. being a typical father, a lot of you are fathers, I know. So the typical father never really thought of that opportunity for himself to improve. He said, oh, my son should join this club. Like, father, you can join as well. No, for my son. So he took me to my first meeting, and that's how I joined Toastmasters. Yeah. But that a lot of people are jealous of me that I joined Toastmasters very young. But you know what? I'm jealous of these Gaviliers who've joined Toastmasters even younger. And by the time they reach 18, the caliber and quality of their presentations is just outstanding. It puts a lot of us to shame. So there is some merit in starting something early. Again, that's a great example of you holding yourself accountable to future versions of yourself. So at 14, as a Gavilier, if you join Toastmasters, you're setting yourself up for success at 18, much higher than an 18-year-old guy joined Toastmasters directly, right? That's the foresight into how you are becoming a friend to your future versions of yourself. So at 25, I could see a marked difference in the way I handle client meetings or pressure or working with people of different age groups, because by the time I was 25, I'd already done all of that at Toastmasters. When I became the president of Chennai Toastmasters at 21, the average age of Toastmasters was 45 then. Then it reduced after that because of IT crowd and stuff. But at that time, it was still 45. So I've had experiences at 21 when there's this big burly middle-aged man would come and say, that lady should be sent out of the club because she said this. And this lady would come and say, this guy is talking inappropriately. If I had met them outside on the road, I might have actually called them auntie, uncle, at that age. But I was the president of the club and I had to do something about it. I've never really experienced such situations at 21. So by the time I'm 25, I could see a marked difference in the way I could speak to people of different age groups, which another 25-year-old might not have been able to, right? So what I was doing at 21 was setting myself up for success at 25 unconsciously. But that can also be done consciously. If you see yourself not as your present self, but as a series different versions of yourself only separated by time, then you're not just selfish for current temptations. You are selfish for the maximizing success of all these versions of yourself. Just like we do financially, we would also do it in our own learning and growth.
I completely agree. Like I joined Toastmasters 4 years back. When I joined Indian club, I was the youngest in my club. And now after that, many new budding Toastmasters have joined young. And the quality of their speech, the way interact is, I should admit, they have such good standards. I actually envy them. Like you mentioned, you envy the Cavaliers. Each and every year, the new Toastmasters who are joining, they are setting the bar higher and higher. We should actually admire the quality, how the Toastmasters International is keeping up. And along with the pathways, everybody is in the same road. We have one more question from our dear Toastmaster Ravi Shankar. We have, as I mentioned, there is about membership attrition. How we can overcome in the scenario post-COVID period. Like, can you share a few ideas to build, to come on these techniques? Any ideas from your own?
A golden question. I don't think anybody has cracked it anywhere in the world. Yeah, but I think I'm sure you might have heard of design thinking, customer centricity, user experience. So like Steve Jobs really made that popular, isn't it? Think of a remote control, and I'll come to your question, but think of a remote control of our TV 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, leave alone 20 years ago. How many buttons would a remote control have, Amal?
Once again?
How many buttons would a typical remote control have when you were growing up in your wherever? How many buttons would a remote control have?
More, I believe, lot of buttons. I don't actually.
Did you ever find out what that, there used to be this blue, green, yellow buttons in the bottom. Did you ever find out what those were for?
Never bothered to, but I have seen them always.
I've always seen them. Yeah. How many buttons would you use out of those 30, 40 buttons?
Few.
Yeah, like 4, 5. What buttons would you use?
Yeah.
Play, volume up, volume down,
Volume
program.
up, volume down. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's a power button. How many buttons does that Apple iTV remote or even remote these days, any smart TV remote have?
Lesser. Most of them are now voice recognition, I believe.
Yeah, that's even better. But even if it's remote, it has like 4 buttons, 5 buttons, like an Apple TV remote or any smart TV remote. Here, my TV has 4, 5 buttons. Yeah, that's because the older remotes were designed by an engineer. The newer remotes are designed by a design thinker. Nothing wrong. No, I'm also an engineer, so I'm not blaming engineer. So the point, that's the paradox of knowledge. Just because the engineer has a use case for 40 buttons doesn't mean the user has a use case for 40 buttons. You got to think like the end user. And one of my core jobs as an organizational consultant in strategy is to really help organizations think from the viewpoint characters of who their customers are. So we actually create artificial personas of defining who are my customers and then completely changing our product cycle or process or whatever it be to the customers. Now, coming to Toastmasters. Now, how many of us have been nimble to really re-evaluate ourselves from the total empathy of our end user after COVID, right? It's risky because on one hand, you got to stick to certain Toastmaster protocol. But on the other hand, there are quite a lot of things that we can do and I'll give you a couple of examples from a couple of clubs here in London. No way perfect, but may give you some innovative ideas. And I'm sure you guys will have a lot of these ideas as well. So one of the clubs completely dismantled and reconstructed what an agenda should be. They realized no Toastmaster meeting online should be more than 1 hour. It was just their view, right or wrong, I don't know. 1 hour, and it need not have all of these transitory roles that in-person meetings have. It just gets complicated. It should get to the point. After the first 5 minutes, the prepared speeches should start. It can't be too. So they kind of redid the entire agenda, firstly, to suit the attention and retention span of people attending online meetings. Second, they decided Zoom link is free of cost. Each time we meet in a room, we have to pay rent, but with one Zoom link, we can meet 100 times. So they started forming small group discussions. Very interesting. So there are 30 members in a club. They started creating subgroups, like-minded groups, where people could come and have coffee conversations around topics that was holding them back in public speaking or leadership. They would facilitate breakout sessions because you have breakout rooms, which you don't probably have in your real room. So what I'm saying is, it all starts, however, with that design thinking process. Who's my customer? What is their typical pains of this new version? And what are 2 or 3 changes I can do to facilitate growth in my end customer? It's true for organizations. It's true for Toastmasters. That's how you change meeting. That's the meeting bit of it. Now, the marketing bit of it and the selling bit of it is something we always lapse. This has got not to do with COVID or not. I remember CEO Daniel Rex had come to Mumbai Toastmasters when I was still there in Mumbai. And he did one exercise with our members, which I still remember, which I use in many of my own speech. I do give him credit, but that was just brilliant. And some of you may relate to it as well. He asked a question. How would you describe Toastmasters to a stranger or to a non-Toastmaster? Many people raised their hands. He picked on a few people and asked, how would you describe Toastmasters? Everybody did their pitch, Toastmasters is an international organization with over 125 countries with 14,000 clubs and is present in its own publics. He said, okay, fine. He listened to 4 or 5 such speeches. Then he said, I have a second question for all of you. What's the question, CEO? He said, the question is, how has Toastmasters transformed your life? Then a lot of people raised their hand, and one person said, I came to Mumbai alone as a bachelor, as an alone person, without anybody, any friend. Toastmasters has given me a friendship circle that has made me feel more confident about myself. Another person said, Toastmasters has given me a platform to break my barriers and discover that leader in me. Another person said, this is not a club, this is a family to me. Then Daniel said, listen, why was the answer to these questions so different? Why didn't you say what you said for the second question when I asked you the first question? Everybody said, probably. He said the way we sell Toastmasters doesn't do justice to how we feel about Toastmasters most of the time. If you were to describe to somebody saying, listen, if you want to be part of a forum which is like-minded, who treat you as a family, help you grow and make you feel great about yourself, and also give you an opportunity to offer back, how would you feel? Nobody can say no to that. If you go and pitch Toastmasters as an international organization to hone your public speaking leadership skills, especially in COVID times, when they have their own worries, we probably sometimes fail. So these two questions of how do I describe it and how do I feel about it? It should be in harmony. When it's not in harmony, we are appealing to just the left brain or the right brain. We're not doing the combination of it. So there are many ways in which we can, from a sales and membership, and number two, from a meeting structure point of view, try to reevaluate ourselves in terms of how we do it. And Amal, feel free, people can unmute themselves as well, even if it's not on chat. So yeah.
Thank you, Aditya. Actually, as you mentioned, it's a good time that we think about how we sell a product. Like many times, if somebody asks me why you're in Toastmasters, it is like a pre-recorded in my mind to improve my communication skills. Like I don't talk to them in detail about how I am a different person now, the contacts I have, the networking I got. No, it's like to enhance my communication skills. It's a pre-built answer. I should confess that. In the coming days, I'll try to improvise it and make it better.
Yeah, and the best part is just be honest about how you feel. And that's often a great answer. The pre-built answers require a lot of preparation and data, but being honest to your feeling requires just honesty. And most of the time that touches the other person in the right way, in the right chord.
We have a question from DTM Abhijit. How do we connect, engage, entangle, commitment, and communication to conquer contest?
Oof, that was a Abhijit-like question there.
I think I should repeat.
Well, at least 3 times. Yeah, go for it.
So let it be in the order. How do we engage, entangle, commitment, and communication to conquer contest?
What is the question? How do you conquer contests, basically?
Abhijit, if you are here, please feel free to unmute yourself and clarify.
No, I know what he's saying, but Abhijit, I just wanted to see you on video, so go ahead.
Hi, Aditya. How are you?
Good, very nice. Lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you. Yep. You got the question.
Well, I got
this is more for our new Toastmasters. Since our COVID, things have been pretty different. Like hearing you online does not give me the feel which I enjoyed when you were with us. So at the same time, we have got contests going on. So how do we have all these attributes which you described in your speech useful to win a contest? Basically, it's for that particular requirement, because at the end of the day, a Toastmaster attends a Toastmasters meeting, and then after taking his personal benefit, he also competes like you did, and he aspires to win at some moment of time. So how do we go about it? And if these 3 points, in addition to commitment, if they can help, how they can help?
Sure. Thanks, Abhijit. And I totally agree and echo your sentiment that the energy I also draw by being in front of all of you in person is a different feel than online. Because my kind of communication, and some of you who have witnessed me live would understand, is I draw a lot of energy from spontaneous humor, like pulling somebody's leg or trying to observe the audience and pull out some energy from the audience. So you would find in our 2 workshops in Doha, there would have been ample laughs and fun and a lot of noise in the crowd, which obviously Zoom restricts. So I fully agree with you, Abhishek. Abhijit. With respect to the question, listen, conquering speeches from the lens of commitment is so important, because very few people, except people like Craig Valentine, for example, who joined Toastmasters and less than 1.5 years later, he was the world champion. Most people, even who have won the world champion, a lot of stories of people who have not got that first prize is lost in history. But even people who won the world championship, you would find that it is never a direct path. It requires coming back, right? You know the story of like Dhananjay was competing 10 years in a stretch. Like some contestants have competed 27 times before they became world championships. So what I'm getting to is, in 2015, I won the first runner-up prize. In 2014, I was in the top 18. I was runner-up at the semifinals in Kuala Lumpur, the year Dhananjay won. And a lot of people said, Aditya, the last thing you want to do is come back again the next year. What if you lose at the club or area level? People are going to call you a one-time wonder. Why don't you milk this award for a few years, do some speeches here and there, be called some mentor and stuff, then compete? And for me, the amount of learning I had in Malaysia was so much that I thought, where will I put that in practice? So I competed in 2015. And it's only because of that, I went further high and became the first runner-up. And now people got even more well-wishers. I'm talking about well-wishers, got very sentimental and said, you've got the first runner-up. Use this. Don't compete again. And what if you lose at the club level? It's going to be such a shame, puppy shame. And again, I said, listen, it's not about the world number 1 or 2, but 2015 has made me a much better speaker than 14. Where will I put this learning into practice? So 2017, I came back and competed. And again, I went to the finals, Vancouver. This time, I didn't win at all. I was in the finals, but I didn't get placed. But in my eyes and in my mind, the speech I gave and delivered in my semifinals and finals in 2017 were far more superior in caliber in my mind than the speech that won me the first runner-up in 2015. So it was a much bigger progress in me. So in the topic of commitment, it can never be a one-time wonder thing. You got to keep hitting. You never know when you would be successful, or if at all you will be successful, but you got to keep hitting. And in that process, there are too many things that will get you entangled into things, such as idolization and people like overhyping you for, remember, I don't know whether that happens in Qatar, in some parts of India, if you win an area contest, the club will be like, our humor champion, the best humorous guy in the world. You've truncated a person even before he can become a better version of himself. After all, he just won an area contest. You've overhyped him to a level that pressure will make him lose at the division contest. So it's not the mistake of the club, but all these entanglements will come along the way. How do you stay engaged? Go back. Literally be a sage, be a saint in the process. I used to call Dhananjay a saint when I was competing with him, because with all the hype and pleasure and the hype and pressure and the style that he brought in and the fan following that he had, to come back, he had to be a saint, meaning he has to ostracize himself from all the other traps that surround success, like hype, like jealousy, like judges' bias. Like I asked him in 2014, for example, he was also in the semis. I was also in the semis. We were in the same hotel in Kuala Lumpur. I said, Dhananjay, since you've come here so many times, don't you think the judges will be biased? He said, Aditya, brother, judges will be biased. I said, Dhananjay, then how do you take care of that bias? I mean, isn't it unfair? He said, the only way I can take care of it is to be at least 10% better than the second best speaker. So even if I account 5% of judges' bias against me, I will still be 5% better than the second best speaker. And that's what happened in the finals in Kuala Lumpur when he gave the speech, I see something in you. He was clearly 20% better than everybody else on stage. That even if you accommodate 15% bias, he was still the winner of the contest, right? So that comes by staying engaged, but not getting entangled. And it comes through setting yourself up for success progressively and all of the other things that we talked about. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Aditya. Our Area 7 Director, Seenath, has a simple question, but she like to hear your perspective. Why communication is important to a leader?
Well, to a bunch of Toastmasters, I don't need to really prove that case. All of you would, is that Zenith? Hi, Zenith. Hope you're doing well. Well, communication is important to a leader just because you're leading people and you got to communicate. Let me give you an example of COVID, for example, right? So when COVID struck, I was working with a few clients and who had to create communication strategies to employees they were firing, employees who they were sending on furloughs here in the UK, to people they had to cut bonuses to say, or you cut salaries to say you're going to work on 25% reduced salary for 6 months, etc. These are all tough things to tell people. Now, most leaders, we are so pressured with, that some benchmark, Harvard benchmark of what a good leader should be. So we overcomplicate. Some leaders were, would send me a communication draft, somebody I was coaching. It would be like, whatever, in our journey to move from leadership. I mean, you read a paragraph, it's so complicated. You don't arrive at anything, but everything sounds inspirational. Most of the times in that period, the communications that worked well for leadership was honesty and being direct. People, COVID is no secret. It puts a lot of pressure on our bottom line. We've had to take some measures. As part of that, this percentage of people will be let go. However, we have worked with a career transition services company to ensure we can do our best for people who we have to let go sincerely. Now, at that stage, interestingly, post-COVID, communications that were simple and direct were met with least resistance. Organizations where leaders thought this was the time to be their inspiring best and did complicated town halls, but with no meat in it, just saying things without meaning anything, doing all the right things, politically right things, but those didn't really work. In fact, those organizations were faced with more turmoil and more attrition, etc., etc. So it's not just that communication is important for a leader. It's tactful communication that's important for a leader, which is again, going back to design thinking, what are people feeling at the moment, right? I keep giving this example, and you may want to close with this if time going against time. But when I was young, and I probably have said this, some of you might have heard this. When I was young, like most mothers, my mother wanted to instill discipline in me. Like she was like, Aditya needs to wake up on time, wake up at 6 o'clock, do your own bed. After eating, put your vessel, put the utensils in the thing, etc., etc. Obviously, like a good son, I never listened. I was just being myself. She tried hard for many years. I was just being a normal boy. When I was 25, 10, 12 years later, I was earning my own salary now. And I heard that a motivational speaker was coming to town. I'm not going to name the motivational speaker, all of you know him, but he charges quite a lot. I was earning at that time only quite less. I was earning like, whatever, 30,000 rupees a month or something like that when I was 23 or 24. And probably, yeah, around that. And he was charging literally my entire month's salary for a 2-hour talk. But then at that time at 24, you want to find that best version of yourself. So I paid that money, went to the 2-hour talk, absorbed everything he said, went back home. My mom was standing in my house. She was also 10 years older now. She asked me, Aditya, tell me, what did you learn? I said, Mom, I've learned the secret of success. She said, really? Tell me. I said, the secret of success, Mom, is to wake up early in the morning. It's to do your own bed, do your own chores. And discipline is the secret to success. My mom looks at me and says, but I've been saying this to you from your age of 6. You paid 30,000 rupees for this. I said, oh yeah, you have been saying, right? Why did I pay 30,000 rupees for this? I thought it was really good actually, Mom. So I gave this example to show you that communication may be the same. Who loved me more? My mother, not this random guy. Whose advice was free? My mother. Who did I love more? My mother. Who had more access to her audience? My mother. 25 years of access. He had only 2 hours of access. Who did I listen to? That random guy. After having given my money as well. So people are irrational. People are not rational. Human beings are irrational. Human beings desire out of emotions, not because of an Excel sheet. Human beings want different appeals. So when we say leaders should be communicators, it seems obvious, but it's not just communicators. Leaders should be able to leverage and understand and be aware of the irrational side of human minds and cater their communication to that irrational part of human beings. And that's when leaders become good communicators, not in terms of the gift of the gab communication, not in terms of holding a mic and delivering a speech with metaphors and similes. That's one bit. But the bit that I am more concerned about, that I find fascinating, is the ability to understand the irrational nature of human motivation and cater their communication to that irrational bit, which leaders in the past have done and used it for extremely good reasons and extremely destructive reasons. That's why some of the, I don't want to take names, but that's why some of the most brutal murderers of some of the wars in the past, those same men were extremely loving fathers. Once they beheaded 300 people during the day during a world war, they would, on their way back home, they may buy a rose for their wife. They may buy a toy for their children. Psychologists find out. Why? Because they were brutal killers because of a cause that they believed in, which was put in them through masterful communication and motivation. But by themselves, they're not bad people. They love their family, they love their children, they go back as very loving boyfriends and husbands, etc. So that's what understanding the fragility of human motivation can do. But you can also use that for elevating people, to use it for a very useful cause. So that's the power of a leader with a good communication skill. It's not the gift of the gab, it's the ability to understand human motivation.